In our last lecture, we designed the interface for our application store, and we've set up our in-app purchase all ready to add in within our project. We've even given our application an ID and created our kind of default or starter profile ready to submit to the App Store. So now in this lecture, we're ready to now focus on setting up our in-app purchases within our application all the way to the point where we can display the product to our user and get ready for them to buy and remove the ads within the app. So we're going to start by jumping straight in to Xcode, and we're going to head all the way over to our store view controller.swift. Now within here, we're going to type in a bunch of code. It's not an easy process, but I'll try and make it as simple and as understandable as possible. Now, like many of the things that we've already added within our applications, such as sharing via social media and even our ads, they all rely on a framework. And in-app purchases is pretty much the same. It relies on a framework called the Store Kit. And this gives us all the capabilities to, when we reference it, to be able to handle the product, display it, handle the transactions when our user has to place in their Apple ID. If the product is bought, what do we do then? Or if the product is failed to be bought, what happens then? And so on and so on. So we need to add in a framework into our project. So to do this, we jump into the name of our project at the very top. And then we're going to go down to our build phases here with our link binary with libraries. We're going to press the little plus symbol here. And what we need to add in is our StoreKit.framework. So select that and add that in. So once that's now in, you can see in our list of frameworks, we're now going to have 4 frameworks in total inside of our application. So jump back into our store view controller.swift, and we now need to import this into this view. So underneath our import UI kit, we import this time our store kit. So by adding that in, it makes this class aware that it exists, and then we can then reference it and all of its capabilities. So already in this view, we've already got set up of all of our objects. We got 2 actions to dismiss the view and purchase the in-app purchase. What we're going to do now then, before we continue, is add in all the functions and all the stuff that we're going to be needing ready to start coding for our in-app purchase to work. So we're first going to start then just after our UI view controller here. We're going to do a comma, and we're going to add in our SK payment transaction observer and SK products request delegate. These are going to be functions that we're going to be using to call upon at certain times as our user, goes through the process of purchasing the in-app purchase. So we type in our SK payment server. Let me find it now. So SK payment transerver, there we go, and then comma, we type in our SK products request delegate, which is just there. Perfect. We got both of those in now. So then what we need to do then is go on to create 2 variables, one for the product and then one for the product ID that we created within iTunes Connect for the in-app purchase. So just after all of our objects now that we added in for our outlets, we're going to create VAR, short for variable, and we call this one our product, which we're going to be referencing throughout our code, which again is going to handle the product being purchased. And that's going to link to an SK product, which is just there, and we end that with a question mark there for the rep. And then we're going to create an additional variable, and this we can simply call this one our product. Let's call it our product ID, because that's pretty much what it's going to be. And that's going to equal a string. Now within this string, we're going to place in our, again, ID for the in-app purchase. So we need to head back over to iTunes Connect where we created our in-app purchase. And we're simply going to take this product ID that we added for the in-app purchase, jump back into Xcode, and paste that in between the 2 quotation marks. So now when we reference the product ID, it now knows it links back to what we created within iTunes Connect. So when we come to display the information within the label and the text view, the information is coming from, again, that in-app purchase we created. So now we need to go on to create 3 functions altogether. Our first one to get the purchase information, the second one to request the product, and our third one to actually handle the payment, whether it is successful or it fails. So at the very bottom here, I'll space this out. I'll do it at the very bottom after all of our actions that we've currently got in. And our first one is simply going to be, we type in funct because we're creating this one on its own, is to get the purchase info, placing 2 brackets at the end there and our semicolon, and press enter. Our second one, or our next 2 now, are ones we can just simply type in. So we can type in our products request, and we need to make sure that it did receive response, which is our first one there. And I'll just get rid of the code bracket there so it doesn't throw up any warnings or errors. And then our third one that we're going to be needing in now is our payment queue. So we need the payment queue that updated transactions, which is just there as well. And I'll get rid of that code too. Perfect. So they're the 3 functions that we're then going to be using within our application to handle it and go through the process of making us buy, again, the in-app purchase. And now we've added those in, again, they linked to what we added just at our UI view controller here. So now we've got rid of all the warnings too. So we need to think about and start from as if our user loaded the view, what kind of method and what kind of things happen in what order. So as soon as the view loads up, we pretty much want to have our buy button disabled, because at that point, the product information hasn't been requested and loaded into our objects. So for that kind of brief moment until it does, we need to make sure that it is disabled. So we simply get our buy button dot is enabled to simply equal false. And at the same time, we need to then request again the product information. So before we do, we're first going to get our SK payment queue dot default dot add observer, and we're adding it to ourselves. This will then help us as we then get the purchase information, which is what's going to appear within this function down below. So that's all going to take place as soon as the view loads up. So as soon as it loads up, then we need to first within this function find out if purchases or payments can be made. And there's only kind of one reason why we can't. So we're either going to have the ability to buy it, or maybe our user has in-app purchases turned off on their device. Maybe, for example, like it could be a young user's device and their parents have disabled in-app purchases so they can't buy stuff. So we need to first find out if that is possible. If it is, then we can go on to request the product information in our second function statement. If it's not, then we're going to simply display a little message within one or two of the actual labels or text views what is going on. So what we need to do then is first, again, decide. So we create an if statement. So if our SK payment queue dot can make payments, and if it can, we then place what we perform within the 2 brackets here. And what it's going to perform first is to obviously request and get our product ID. Once it's got our product ID, we can then call upon our second function to start loading in all the data into, again, our objects. So we're going to create a constant first, and we simply call it request. And this is going to equal our SK products request, which is just there. Then we do our bracket here. And then we need to add in then our products identifier. And we need to link this back to the product ID that we created. So we create an NS set, and then we link this to our objects, because there is a possibility that we can add in multiple product informations at any given time. So we can link this now to self.product.id. We only got the one that we've created, end that as a bracket. Then we do space as exclamation mark set. I'm going to set this now to the more than less than symbol, our string. There we go. And then we end that with a bracket. Then what we're going to do is set our request that we created up above in our constant there to the delegate to simply equal self. And then our request is then going to do dot start. So by equaling the delegate to itself, we can then call upon itself then to request itself. And as it goes for that motions there, because these also functions are linked to the delegates that we created, once the request starts, it automatically kicks in our product request, because again, we've now started to request the product ID. So this only happens, like I said once before, if the device can make some sort of payment. Now, if it can't, and the only reason for that would be if our user has in-app purchases disabled, we then create an else statement. And in the else statement here, what we're going to do is set up our product title, which is actually called product title dot text to simply equal a certain string, and we do the same now for our product description dot text. Oh, there we go. Simply equal a certain string. So if it's not available, we can simply say within these two items here, I want to kind of like use both of them. Warning. We type in the title, and in the description, please enable in-app purchases in your settings. Just something simple like that. So if it doesn't work, we can give our user a reason why it doesn't work. So that's pretty much very, handy for it. So whatever happens then, if it's available to do, then it's going to request the product. If it's not, tell them why, basically, why it can't request the product. And that is all down to they need to enable in-app purchases in their settings. So we've covered both aspects now. So once it's requested it, we then need to go on to start displaying the information within, again, the label and the text view. So we space out the product request section now. And how we're going to do this is then, if again we can request it and we've got the products, we're then going to display that in the product title, in the product description, and we're getting this information from our product ID we created within iTunes Connect. Now, even though the user is going to have the ability to make payments, it doesn't mean they're going to be able to get a connection to the App Store. And reason for that being is maybe their internet connection fails. Maybe as they're going through the process, something happens that stops the connection. So as well as kind of finding out if they can or cannot, we need to find out if it is possible to then receive the connection. If they can receive it, then we'll display the product information. If they can't, then we'll just simply say product not found or something like that, just to tell them that maybe the internet connection went down or there was a problem receiving the data. But we need to also think about both sides of this too. So we're going to create a variable, and I'm simply going to call it products. And that's going to equal a response dot products. So now I can reference the products anywhere within the code, and we're going to do an if statement. For if, we need to do it within the brackets, our products dot count is simply equal to the value of 0, then perform what we place within these brackets. And basically what that means is if our products equals completely nothing, then it wasn't possible for us to request the information to display it within our application. So what we can do is simply get the product title dot text to simply equal a string, saying again we can place in warning. And we'll take what we did just up above as well to save a bit of time. Warning. Product not found. There we go. So you say something like that then. So basically that means the product was not found because we couldn't establish a connection to actually get it. Now if the connection was established, that means that the products would not equal 0. It means we'll have something in it. So what we'll then do is create an else statement. So else. We then get that product information and then place it again within the objects on our store view. So we're going to get our product, which is just at the bottom there. And then what we're going to do then is equal this to our products. And we do our 2 brackets. And our 0 there. So this is the index from within it. So the first one within our list, because if we are working with multiple kind of in-app purchases, we can place this in an array. So we call upon the 0. Now it doesn't mean, again, if it equals 0, anything like that. You got to remember when we're working with like stuff like arrays, 0 is always the first entry within it. And because we've only got one, again, in-app purchase, we're always going to call upon this anyway. So this kind of method is set up for if you do have multiple purchases, you can expand upon it. But what I'm going to do is make sure that the product equals products, which again is now linking all the way back to our product ID that we created. And then what we're going to do then is simply get our product title dot text to simply equal our product. So don't get too confused between products and products. Exclamation mark dot localized title. Now the localized title, you see if I go back there, we have two. We have a localized title and a localized description. This is what we get in from simply from the App Store of iTunes Connect. So we want to make sure the localized title gets placed within the title itself, and the product description dot text, and again make this equal our product exclamation mark, because we're converting this data over to displayed within the string. Localized description. So this is what we placed in, again, within the in-app purchase of the title and description, and we're telling it where it needs to be placed. So this can both go into the product title of the label and then into the product description of our text view. And at the same time this happens, so if it has the ability to place these in the two labels, then we've requested the data, it's actually working. Meaning we then need to re-enable our buy button to allow our user to make that purchase. So we're going to get our buy button dot is enabled to simply equal true. So our buy button then becomes re-enabled, and then once our user presses it, they then can go on again to make the payment. But there's still one more thing we're going to take care of in this section here of requesting our product, for maybe if the product that we're requesting is actually invalid. So we're going to create a let, and we're going to call it invalids. So we don't get too confused with the word invalid. To equal our response. So like how we created our variable up above for our products, and this is simple response is going to be equaling, or kind of set towards, an invalid product identifiers. So if the product is invalid, we're simply going to create a for statement. So for the product, there we go, invalids, and basically what that means is if it is invalid, we can perform an action for it. Now if it is invalid, we don't really want to do anything for the user. This is mainly purely down to our side of things. So if it is invalid, again, when we go to build and run and develop with it, we can simply tell ourselves that maybe the in-app purchase is not actually working. So what we could do, you can either choose to display this to our user, but it's entirely up to you how you want to perform it. Maybe an alert, maybe display it within the title and description of the objects. What I'm going to simply do is have this print to our debug area. So we could just simply say product not found, and then link this, we do a backslash 2 brackets and place in product, whatever it says within it. Simply that will just tell us, what in-app purchase is not working or simply invalid. So again, you don't really need to show this to the user, but that is another option you can cover. There's pretty much this function covers all aspects for the ability. If it can't establish a connection, it will tell us that the product's not found. If it does establish the connection, it will display it to our user. And pretty much if the product that we're trying to request is invalid, we won't really tell the user that, because it just shows us that we've got some poor development on our side. But we'll just tell ourselves that the product is invalid. So we've got it all displayed in. We've pretty much enabled our buy button. Once we press our buy button, we then need to trigger the action that goes through the transition state to actually buy it. So again, we need to also think of the other aspect that, yes, we've got to the stage where we're now displaying it to our user. We've kind of covered many aspects for, again, like, if the device can make purchases, if we can establish a connection. Now we need to think about if they can buy it, because it could be a possibility that they get all the way to this stage and the transaction could still fail. Maybe it could be they cancel it halfway through, or maybe when they go to buy it, there's not a significant amount of funds in their account to cover the costs. So that is a possibility. We've always got to be thinking about what if when it comes to developing. So space out the last function then, this is our payment queue. And we're going to first set up then kind of like a switch statement, which I kind of like to use within in-app purchases. That gives us the ability to perform, or find out what the status is and then perform an action up on it. So we're going to create a for statement first. It's for, and it's going to be for our transaction. So find that now. Simply type in action there, get rid of the S. So for transaction in transactions, we can perform what we place within these brackets, again for our for statement, and then we're going to create within the for statement a switch. So this is all being triggered at once. A switch statement allows us to have two different types of Okay, you're going to think of it states and then perform an action up on it. So the switch is going to be for our transaction we created just up above, and that is going to be dot transaction state. So that's what we're working on. We're working on the transaction state. And in our first case here, what I'll space these out because they're a little bit easier to kind of see and understand. In our first case here, this is going to be linked to our SK payment transaction state, which if I can find it now, there we go, transaction state, simply dot purchased. So if the transaction state was purchased, so if it was successful, our user pressed buy, they put in their password or their Touch ID fingerprint scanner, and it was successful, what happens then? Well, we'd kind of need to give them a product. That's kind of what's happening. So what we simply do then is we simply, in the view did load, we made our SK payment queue default. We added it to the queue basically. We now need to kind of finish that transaction. So we get our SK payment queue dot default. Again, this is what we typed in the view did load. Dot finish transaction, and the transaction that we're finishing is transaction. So we've finished the queue, we completely cleared the queue, then we're going to tell the user that it was successful, that, congratulations, you have purchased it. And what we're going to do, we'll place these in with our product title and description. So dot text can simply equal our string, and inside our title, we can simply put thank you, and then the product description dot text to simply equal as well. We can simply say this: the product has been purchased. There we go. And then we're going to disable the buy button. So we've disabled it, we've re-enabled it. Once they've purchased it, we're going to make sure that it then is disabled again, so they can't go through the motions of buying it again. So is enabled to simply equal false. There we go. So that's what's going to happen again when they buy it. Now, in the next lecture, we're going to be focusing on once they buy it, how we can then unlock the ability to remove the ads and make sure that that purchase saves within the application. So we will be coming back to this section to trigger another function in the next lecture to unlock again to remove the ads. So again, this is where it all gets triggered from. We then need to create a secondary case statement. So type in case again, and this one is going to be for a SK payment transaction state for this time that failed. So what would happen if the payment failed? Well, again, the first thing we need to do is to get our SK payment queue and then remove that transaction from the queue itself. So again, it's not pending or being in the queue. We need to keep doing this because if we didn't do it and they go to buy again, then we've got two in-app purchases in the queue ready to be bought, and that would kind of create some kind of confusion. So what we do then is finish transaction, and what we're finishing is our transaction we created up above. And then we're going to simply set it up and tell pretty much our user what just happened. So we could copy what we've done just up above here with the title and description. And then we can simply change it here. So the title, you can put in warning. And then change in the description here. We can simply say the product has, we just put in has not been purchased. And we don't really need to do anything after that because it failed. So we don't need to change it. We don't need to disable the button because they didn't purchase it. So we give them a chance to try it all over again. So in the default here, all we need to do in the code there is put in the break to completely end it. And then we pretty much set it all up there. We can close up all this spacing between these three brackets, which finishes up this code there. And that kind of handles it to the point where if it's successful or if it fails on the purchase. In the next lecture anyway, we're going to be focusing back on this purchase state for once it is successful, how we can then go on to remove the ads. And again, it could be anything. It could be like giving you extra money in the game. It could be like giving you an extra racetrack, like the examples Apple give you. But this is pretty much where it comes from. So in this current state right now, we can go on and purchase the in-app purchase. But once we do, all it's going to do is disable the button and we've got nothing in return. Now there's one more thing that we need to add in before we're going to go to build and run and check it out on the simulator. And that is, if I scroll all the way to the top now, our purchase button. So if I press it at the moment, it currently does nothing whatsoever. And this button is what triggers all those functions to start taking place. Well, pretty much if, again, the transaction is successful or not. So we're going to create a let within it, and let's simply call it payment. And that's going to equal our SK payment, which if I just find it now is just at the bottom there. And then we do our bracket for then our product, and inside of it, what are we buying? Well, we're buying simply our product with an exclamation mark to convert that data over, which again is housing all the information for us. And then we add that to the basically the payment queue, because that's what we simply want to buy. So we type in sk payment queue dot default dot add payment, and what are we going to be adding in? Of course, our payment we created just up above. So that's all we need to do there then. So let's go to build and run. That warning should now disappear. Yes, it has. And let's see exactly what happens when we request this product information within the store view of our application. Now, again, we can go through the motion. We can actually buy the in-app purchase, but we don't want to do that because, again, like I said, we've set it up at the minute just to disable the buy button. So nothing would happen. It won't remove any of the ads just yet. So we press the info button, takes you to this new view, and you can see that split second there while we're waiting, it then updates, remove the ads, remove all the ads within the game to have an ad-free experience. And again, that is solely coming from iTunes Connect. That's that kind of data we did not put in the application. So we now know that it's requesting that data and then displaying it within the app. The one thing I don't like at the moment is just that split second as we're waiting for the information to appear. It's displaying the title and the default text within the text view. So we're going to remove that now. So back within our main.storyboard, simply going to select the title, and I'm simply going to delete the text within it. And the same goes for our text view. Just simply delete text so they're completely blank. This means now when I build and run and we go to the store, there's no text in there at the start, and then it appears. Display the information from the localized information from within iTunes Connect. So now let's build and run. We can press the information button. Again, it's all blank until that information then appears. So for that split second, the purchase button is disabled as well. I won't press the button just yet, and I advise you not to do it just yet either, because we haven't set up the ability to what happens after we do purchase it, which in the next lecture, we're going to be focusing on how, once we have purchased it, that it will then remove the ads within the application, and then how we can create the ability to save how it removed the ads. So every time we return back the application, the ads will never appear once we've made the in-app purchase.